Most people think a home office is a spare bedroom with a laptop, a dying ficus, and the faint scent of crushed dreams. My home office has its own dedicated 200-amp service, a Faraday cage that could probably withstand a solar flare, and enough computing power to accurately predict the next 3 celebrity divorces and the trajectory of a wayward Russian satellite. To my neighbors on the idyllic, painfully beige Blossom Drive, I'm Alex, the quiet, slightly nerdy guy in number 42 who works in IT. They see the cluster of peculiar antennas on my roof and assume I'm either a very committed conspiracy theorist or trying to get free premium cable. To the folks at the Tri-County Office of Emergency Management, however, I'm GridCom. I'm the disembodied voice in their headsets that keeps the world from tipping into chaos. When the lights go out, the cell towers go down, and the only thing standing between order and anarchy is a clean radio frequency. I coordinate the communications grid for the police, fire, and emergency medical services across 250,000 souls. My job is to make sure that when a firefighter runs into a burning building, their call for help is heard. It's a job I love, and I'm damn good at it. It's also a job that requires a certain hardware footprint. And that hardware footprint was the source of all my current misery. Her name was Brenda. Brenda was our HOA president, a woman who wielded the 3-ring binder of community bylaws like a scepter of absolute tyrannical power. She moved through our quiet suburban world on a cloud of entitlement and Chanel No. 5, her eyes constantly scanning for violations. A rogue garden gnome, a garbage can left out 10 minutes past the deadline, a blade of grass daring to grow a millimeter taller than its brethren. From the moment I installed my primary high-frequency antenna, I became her Moriarty. My humble, federally protected antenna array was, in her eyes, a crime against aesthetics, a blight on her personal vision of suburban perfection. Her campaigns against me were the stuff of legend, at least in my own head. First came the antenna petition of 23, which garnered a grand total of 2 signatures, hers and her husband's, a man so thoroughly browbeaten he probably would have signed his own death warrant if she'd put it on a clipboard. Then came the formal complaint about the unnatural hum emanating from my property. I spent a weekend meticulously checking every piece of my equipment, only to trace the source to the failing motor on her swimming pool pump. She never acknowledged the finding, of course. My personal favorite was the time she tried to fine me $50 for my grass being a 1/4 inch too high the day after I had mowed it. I fought it by submitting a 30-page report, complete with meteorological data on grass growth rates and time-stamped security footage of my lawnmower. The fine was rescinded, but my file at the HOA office, I'm sure, was stamped with a large red priority threat. Lately, her attacks had taken the form of passive-aggressive notes slipped into my mailbox, typed on expensive, cream-colored stationery. The latest one was a masterclass in the genre. "Dear resident," it began, as if she didn't know my name, my car, my dog's name, and probably my social security number. "The Architectural Review Committee has noted a metallic structure that is not in harmony with the community's aesthetic. Please refer to Bylaw 7.14. Unsightly protrusions. Prompt attention to this matter is appreciated." I remembered my last phone call with her on the subject. "Brenda, we've been over this," I had said, my voice a carefully controlled monotone. "It's a federally licensed amateur radio antenna. The Telecommunications Act of 1996, which I'm sure you read for fun, offers it certain legal protections." "I'm sure it is, Alex," she'd replied, her voice dripping with a syrupy condescension that could give a diabetic a coma. "But it's also very pointy. It disrupts the neighborhood's visual continuity, and frankly, I'm concerned about the radio waves. My prize-winning begonias have been looking very droopy ever since you installed that thing." I'd wanted to tell her that the only thing disrupting the neighborhood's continuity was her collection of concrete lawn geese, each dressed in a seasonal outfit. I'd wanted to explain that the power output from my antenna was less than what her microwave leaked, and that her begonias were probably drooping because she was watering them with her own venom. Instead, I'd just said, "I'll take it under advisement, Brenda," and hung up. I tossed the latest note into the recycling bin. She could send all the creamy stationery she wanted. I had bigger things to worry about. On a massive monitor that dominated one wall of my command center, a swirling vortex of red, orange, and yellow was bearing down on our county. The meteorologists, in a fit of Latin-inspired grandiosity, had dubbed it Tempestus Maximus. It was a beast of a storm system, and my job was to make sure our first responders could talk through the teeth of it. Storm prep is a symphony of routine, a checklist of tasks that are as exciting as watching paint dry, but a specific kind of boring that keeps people alive. Check the generator fuel, test the battery backups, ping the remote tower sites, cycle through the key radio channels, listening to the comfortable, professional chatter of dispatchers and patrol officers getting ready for a long, wet night. Police dispatch, clear. City services, clear. EMS coordination, clear as a bell. I switched over to the primary county fire dispatch frequency, fire main. This was the big one, the channel that coordinated every fire truck, rescue squad, and ambulance in the field. It was the digital lifeline. And it was gone. In its place was a sound so loud, so obnoxious, it felt like a physical assault on my eardrums. Bzzzt wump wump! Bzzzt wump wump! It was a pulsing, rhythmic, brutally ugly noise. It wasn't the gentle hiss of atmospheric interference or the crackle of a distant lightning strike. It wasn't the accidental squawk of a stuck microphone. This was deliberate. This was manufactured. It was a digital sledgehammer swung with malicious intent, and it was sitting right on top of the most critical frequency in our entire emergency network. It was like someone screaming a single, off-key note in the middle of the Hallelujah chorus. It was jamming. In a heartbeat, the relaxed, methodical calm of my storm prep evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. My fingers flew across a keyboard, pulling up the real-time spectrum analyzer display. My blood ran cold. The screen, normally a gently rolling landscape of small, blue-green hills representing various radio signals, was dominated by a single, massive, angry red spike. It was a digital middle finger, planted squarely on the frequency for fire main. This wasn't just interference. This was electronic warfare. My training kicked in. I brought up the controls for my rooftop directional antenna array. With a few clicks of the mouse, I began to swing the antenna's listening vector, trying to get a bearing on the hostile signal. I pointed it east. The signal remained strong. I swung it west. The signal strength meter on my screen screamed, the red bar slamming into the maximum reading. The source was close, very close. My heart started to pound, a nervous rhythm against my ribs. I narrowed the beam of the antenna, tightening the focus from a wide cone to a narrow pencil. The software cross-referenced the signal strength with its topographical map data, drawing a line, a vector, pointing from my house directly toward the origin. The line cut across my lawn, across the street, and stopped. It stopped at a very familiar beige-colored two-story colonial home. The digital map on my screen zoomed in automatically, the targeting software doing its job with brutal, unforgiving precision. A single house on Blossom Drive was pinpointed with a flashing, insistent red dot. The address displayed in stark white letters, 38 Blossom Drive. Brenda's house. I stared at the screen, at the angry red spike on the analyzer and the flashing red dot on the map. and a single thought echoed in the sudden, ringing silence of my command center. You have got to be kidding me. My first thought, my only thought for a solid 60 seconds, was that my gear was wrong. It had to be. This was $500,000 of state-of-the-art radio frequency monitoring equipment, stuff that made the NSA's B team jealous. But it had to be mistaken, because the alternative was too insane to contemplate. The alternative was that Brenda, a woman whose technical expertise peaked at figuring out how to unjam the printer by turning it off and on again, was running a sophisticated electronic warfare campaign from her chintz-draped living room. I began to cycle through the possibilities, each more ridiculous than the last. Maybe it was a faulty appliance? A new souped-up garage door opener from a shady online seller? A demon-possessed microwave with a grudge against firefighters? I ran every diagnostic I could think of, my fingers a blur on the keyboard. I rebooted the primary server. I recalibrated the antenna array. I cross-referenced the signal with 3 different remote monitoring stations I control across the county, triangulating the source from miles away. The result was always the same: a cold, hard, digital consensus. The signal was a powerful, wide-band jamming signal, a blunt instrument designed to do nothing but obliterate a specific frequency. And it was emanating from a single, undeniable point of origin: 38 Blossom Drive. I even managed to get a signal fingerprint. Pulling up a library of known transmission signatures, I ran a comparison. My system got a match in seconds. It was a TG10 Pro mobile privacy jammer, or some such nonsense. A cheap, brutally effective, and highly illegal device you could buy from a dozen sketchy websites, usually marketed to cheating spouses or small-time crooks for ensuring privacy in your car. But this one wasn't in a car. This one was plugged into a wall, and it was cranked up to a power level that was probably cooking the sparrows off her roofline. This wasn't an accident. This was a declaration of war. My mind raced, trying to connect the dots. The complaints about my antenna. Her paranoid delusions about radio waves and droopy begonias. She'd probably bought the jammer to block my mind control signals, or whatever nonsense she'd cooked up in her head. But in her magnificent, weaponized ignorance, she had aimed a bazooka at a fly and hit an ammunition depot. She wasn't just jamming me. She was jamming the entire emergency response system for 250,000 people on the eve of a major storm. Okay, deep breaths. There was a protocol for this. A very formal, very serious protocol involving federal agencies and men in dark suits. But that was Plan Z. First came Plan A. Be a human being, be a neighbor. Maybe, just maybe, I could solve this with a simple, rational conversation. It was a long shot, like trying to teach a cat to file its own taxes, but I had to try. I put on my most unthreatening, I'm just a concerned neighbor face, a look I practiced in the mirror that made me look vaguely constipated. I pulled on a raincoat. The wind was picking up, driving the first fat drops of rain sideways, and walked across the street. The air was electric, and I don't just mean the impending thunderstorm. I felt like a diplomat crossing into hostile territory, armed with nothing but reason and a desperate hope for sanity. I rang her doorbell. A ridiculously long rendition of the Westminster chimes echoed from within, each note a tiny, tinkling hammer blow to my already frayed nerves. After a small eternity, the door creaked open. Brenda stood there, silhouetted against her obsessively tidy foyer, holding a small, yappy dog that looked like a dust bunny with eyeballs. Her face, already set in its default state of sour disapproval, curdled even further the moment she saw me. "Brenda, hi," I started, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. "Sorry to bother you, especially with the storm coming, but I need to talk to you about a serious technical issue." The yappy dog yapped. Brenda's eyes narrowed. "If this is about the antenna again, Alex, my answer is no," she snapped. her voice as sharp as broken glass. "It's an eyesore, and the HOA board is preparing a formal cease and desist." "It's not about that. Well, not directly," I said, trying to keep my own voice level. This was delicate. "Brenda, are you running any new electronic devices in the house? Anything at all? A new security system, a gadget you ordered online?" "I don't see how that's any of your business," she sniffed, pulling the dust bunny closer to her chest. I took a deep breath. "Look, something in your house is emitting a powerful radio signal that is interfering with, and I need you to understand how serious this is, the county's emergency frequencies. First responders, fire trucks." She let out a short, sharp laugh that was utterly devoid of humor. "Don't be ridiculous. That's impossible. If anything is interfering, it's your giant metal monstrosity." She gestured vaguely towards my house. "It's probably broadcasting all sorts of frequencies. I've had a headache for 3 days straight." "Patience, Alex, patience." "Brenda, I have $500,000 of professional-grade equipment in my basement that says the signal is coming from right here," I said, pointing at her beige welcome mat. "I am asking you nicely. Please, go find whatever new gadget you have plugged in and turn it off." Her face flushed a dangerous shade of crimson. "This is harassment. You're spying on me with your satellite dishes. I knew it. I'm going to call the police." She slammed the door in my face, the Westminster chimes sounding one final, mocking peal. I stood there on her porch for a moment, the rain starting to plaster my hair to my forehead. As I turned to walk away, I muttered to the closed door, "You know what? Please do. It'll save me a phone call." As it turned out, Brenda was a woman of her word. 20 minutes later, as I was back in my command center watching the red spike on my analyzer pulse with renewed vigor, the blue and red lights of a police cruiser flashed across my basement window. So she'd actually done it. She'd called the cops on me for harassment. This was escalating beautifully. I went upstairs to find Officers Dave and Gary, the dynamic duo of suburban dispute resolution, standing on my welcome mat. I knew them by sight. They were the same 2 officers who had responded to Brenda's infamous, unnatural hum complaint last year. Dave was the older of the 2, a man with a weary face and a habit of chewing his gum with the slow, methodical rhythm of a cow chewing its cud. Gary was younger, sharper, but already had the 1,000-yard stare of someone who had refereed one too many arguments over property lines and barking dogs. "Evening, sir," Dave said, his tone flat. "We got a call from your neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, says you were harassing her." "Evening, officers," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "I wasn't harassing her. I was trying to prevent a public safety disaster. Would you like to come in?" They exchanged a look, the universal cop expression that says, "Great, another one of these." They stepped into the entryway, bringing the smell of damp wool and stale coffee with them. I tried to explain the situation as calmly and rationally as possible, carefully omitting any classified jargon or details about the true nature of my job. I dumbed it down to the level of a high school physics class. So in short, I concluded, her house is broadcasting a signal that's blocking the radio channel the fire department uses to talk to each other. With this big storm rolling in, this is incredibly dangerous. It's like someone cutting the phone lines to the 911 call center. Dave chewed his gum, his expression unreadable. "Right, a radio signal. So, it's like static?" I fought the urge to bang my head against the wall. A very specific, very illegal, very powerful static, yes. Think of it as a fire hose of static aimed directly at their walkie-talkies. "Sir," Gary interjected, his voice laced with skepticism, "did you have another argument with Mrs. Henderson? Because she's saying you were threatening her and accusing her of bizarre things." "I was warning her. I insisted, my frustration bubbling. "There's a difference. Can't you just go over there and ask her to unplug whatever it is? It's probably a little black box with an antenna." Dave sighed, a long, suffering sound. "Sir, we can't just enter someone's home and tell them to unplug their toaster because of static. We don't have probable cause. For all we know, your equipment is malfunctioning. Right now, this is a he said, she said. It's an HOA issue, a civil matter." The phrase civil matter was like a dagger to my heart. It was cop speak for not our problem. "It's a federal crime," I said, my voice rising. "Title 47 of the Communications Act, willful and malicious interference with public safety radio services, Section 333. It carries a fine of up to $100,000 in prison time." Gary shared another weary look with Dave. "Look, sir," he said, his tone shifting to one of placating condescension. "Why don't you just try to avoid Mrs. Henderson for the night? Keep the noise down. Try to get along with your neighbors." He gave me a thin, professional smile. "Have a nice night." And with that, they turned and left, leaving me standing in my own entryway, fuming in a cloud of righteous indignation. They were gone. Plan B had failed spectacularly. I was on my own. I stomped back down to my command center. The red spike was still there, a monument to Brenda's pettiness and the world's indifference. Dave and Gary were useless. Official channels were useless, at least at the local level. They needed undeniable, irrefutable, spoon-fed proof. They needed a smoking gun, a signed confession, and a PowerPoint presentation explaining what a radio was. Fine. If I couldn't get them to act, I'd have to create a situation they couldn't ignore. Dave and Gary were right about one thing, though. This was an HOA issue now. And the HOA had rules. Lots of them. Brenda's favorite weapon was her sacred 3-ring binder of bylaws. Well, two could play at that game. I pulled up a PDF of the Blossom Drive Homeowners Association covenants, conditions, and restrictions. I started reading, scrolling through pages of legalese about lawn maintenance, fence heights, and the approved shades of beige for exterior paint. My eyes were starting to glaze over when I found it. A beautiful, glorious loophole, tucked away in a dusty corner of the document. Bylaw 11.3. All installations, maintenance, and repairs related to public utilities, including but not limited to electric, water, natural gas, and communications, are exempt from architectural review and standard aesthetic requirements, provided they meet all applicable city and county codes. A slow, evil, magnificent grin spread across my face. Under a state-level Emergency Preparedness Act, my home station, as the designated nerve center for the regional grid, was officially classified as a public utility communications service. I'd never had to invoke that status before. It was my ace in the hole, a card I kept tucked away for a truly special occasion. And Brenda had just handed me a special occasion on a silver platter. My current antenna was an unsightly protrusion. Fine, I'll give her an unsightly protrusion she can't do a damn thing about. My fingers danced across the keyboard, my anger now channeled into a productive, creative, and deeply petty new purpose. I wasn't just going to fix the problem anymore. I was going to fix the problem in the most over-the-top, legally bulletproof, and gloriously obnoxious way possible. I opened a new browser tab and typed in a search. Industrial Tower Installation, Tri-County Area. The first result was a company called Manny's Tower and Trenching. Their slogan was simple and to the point. You want it up, we put it up. Perfect. I looked at their online catalog of commercial-grade equipment and found exactly what I was looking for. It was beautiful. It was audacious. It was perfect. I picked up my phone and dialed the number. A gruff voice answered on the second ring. Manny's. You dig it, we trench it. Hi, I said, trying to sound as professional as possible. I have a somewhat unusual residential project. I need a 20-foot ballasted monopole antenna tower installed in my backyard. I also need a 3-foot deep, 50-foot long trench dug from the base of the tower to my house for a 6-inch shielded conduit, and a separate 12-foot copper grounding rod array to be driven into the earth. There was a long, silent pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint sound of a diesel engine in the background. "This at a house?" Manny finally asked, his voice a mixture of disbelief and professional curiosity. "That's right," I said calmly. "A house in Blossom Drive. I have all the permits from the City Utility Commission ready to go, and I need it done tomorrow." There was another pause, shorter this time. I heard him chuckle, a low, gravelly sound. "It's your money, pal," he said. "We'll be there at 8. Just as I hung up, a secure line on my console began to flash. It was a direct link to the county EOC. I put on my headset. "Gridcom," I answered. The voice on the other end was gravelly and full of frustration. It was Fire Chief Miller, an old-school, no-nonsense guy I'd worked with for a decade. "Gridcom, what the hell is going on with Fire Main?" he barked, no preamble. "It's a goddamn garbage disposal over here. We've got trees down on Route 9 from this wind, and my guys can barely confirm their locations with dispatch. One of my engines almost got sent to the wrong address." Hearing the genuine stress in his voice lit a fire under me. This wasn't a game anymore. This wasn't about petty revenge or annoying Brenda. This was about Chief Miller's guys. "I know, Chief, I'm dealing with it," I said, my voice low and serious. "It's a localized, malicious interference issue." "Localized where?" he demanded. "I'll send a truck over there to have a conversation with whoever's responsible." "Trust me, you can't. Not yet," I said. "It's delicate. I'm enacting a technical solution as we speak. Just have your guys switch over to the secondary channel for now. I'll have the primary cleared within 24 hours, I promise." There was a grumble of assent from Miller before he signed off. I took off my headset, my jaw tight. The clock was ticking. Brenda's little temper tantrum was about to have very real consequences, and my solution couldn't come soon enough. The next morning the storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean and dripping. The sky was a bruised, mottled gray, but the wind had died down. At 8 a.m. sharp, a beast of a truck rumbled onto Blossom Drive, towing a flatbed trailer loaded with steel beams, a small excavator, and a trenching machine that looked like a prop from a Mad Max movie. Manny and his 2-man crew, all sporting formidable beards and an air of no-nonsense competence, had arrived. Manny himself was a grizzled oak of a man with a wry smile. He looked at my meticulously printed city permits, looked at my house, looked at Brenda's house next door, and then looked back at me. "Gonna be a fun day," he said, and it wasn't a question. Within minutes, my backyard was transformed into a professional work site. The sound of their diesel-powered trencher was, to my ears, a glorious symphony of progress. It bit into my lawn with a satisfying roar, carving a neat brown line through the damp grass. To Brenda, it was apparently the apocalypse. She stormed out of her back door, a vision in a pink silk dressing gown and fuzzy slippers. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. "What is the meaning of this?" she shrieked, her voice somehow carrying over the noise of the machinery. "What is that infernal machine? It's 8:05 in the morning." Manny, with the practiced ease of a man who deals with hysterical homeowners for a living, shut off the trencher. He pulled out an earplug and gave her a polite nod. "Morning, ma'am. Just doing our job." Brenda's attention snapped to me. I was standing on my back deck, sipping a hot coffee, enjoying the show immensely. She pointed a trembling, accusatory finger in my direction. "You! This is a violation. The noise, the dirt. You're ruining my garden's ambiance." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee. "Morning, Brenda," I said cheerfully. "This? Oh, it's just a necessary upgrade for my public utility communications service. All permitted, all legal, see?" I gestured to the stand I'd set up near the property line, where the city permits were prominently displayed in a waterproof sleeve. Her eyes darted to the permits, then back to the growing trench. For a moment she was speechless, her brain apparently short-circuiting at the sight of an official document thwarting her will. "I'm calling the police," she finally sputtered, recovering her voice. "Again!" "You do that," I said, taking another sip. "I'm sure they'd love to hear from you." 30 minutes later, as Manny's crew was lowering the base of the 20-foot monopole into its freshly dug foundation, the familiar cruiser of Officers Dave and Gary rolled up. They trudged into my backyard, their shoulders slumped with the weary resignation of men who knew their day was about to get stupider. Brenda was there waiting for them, practically vibrating with indignation. Gary looked at me, then at the construction site, then back at me. He didn't even bother asking what was going on. "Let me guess," he said, his voice flat as a pancake. "She called about the noise." "And the dirt," I added helpfully. "Don't forget the dirt. And the ambiance. She's very concerned about the ambiance." Dave, meanwhile, had walked over to the permits. He read them carefully, his lips moving slightly. He looked at the half-assembled tower, which was already taller than my house's roofline, then turned back to Brenda. "Everything's in order, ma'am," he said, his voice carrying the dead weight of official finality. "It's a legal utility installation." "But it's hideous! Look at it!" Brenda wailed, gesturing at the galvanized steel pole. Manny, who was tightening a massive bolt, paused and patted the pole affectionately. "She's a beaut, Clark," he muttered under his breath. To Brenda, he said, "Top of the line, ma'am. Built to withstand a hurricane." "Ma'am, please go back inside," Gary said, his patience clearly worn to a single, frayed thread. "This is a lawful construction site. There's nothing we can do here." Brenda shot a look at me that could have curdled milk, a look of pure, impotent fury. She spun on her heel and stormed back into her house, slamming her back door with enough force to rattle the windows. Dave watched her go, then turned to me. He gave me a long look, one that was no longer just annoyed. There was something else in it, a flicker of grudging respect, a hint of amusement. "Try to keep it down before 10, he said, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. Then he and Gary trudged back to their car and drove away. By late afternoon, the job was done. Standing in my backyard was a glorious 20-foot-tall monument to malicious compliance. It was sleek, professional, and utterly, magnificently out of place in our suburban paradise. It was perfect. But my new toy wasn't just for show. It was a highly sensitive phased array antenna, a piece of equipment so precise I could probably use it to read the brand name on a golf ball at 500 yards. Overkill for a neighborhood squabble? Oh, absolutely. But it allowed me to do something my old antenna couldn't: isolate and record Brenda's jamming signal with pristine, undeniable clarity, filtering out every other scrap of atmospheric noise. It was time to gather the evidence that would finally end this. Back in my command center, I initiated a recording. The jamming signal was still there, pulsing away on fire main, a steady heartbeat of electronic malevolence. I pulled up my home security camera feed, which had a clear view of the street, and placed it in a window next to my spectrum analyzer. Then I waited. At 4:15 p.m., Brenda's garage door opened. She backed her pristine white Lexus out of the driveway and headed down the street. The moment her car turned the corner at the end of Blossom Drive, the jamming signal on my screen vanished. Poof, gone. The frequency for fire main was suddenly, blissfully clear. I kept recording. For 20 minutes, there was nothing but the gentle hiss of an open channel. At 4:37 p.m., the white Lexus reappeared. It pulled into her driveway. The garage door closed. And precisely 5 seconds later, the angry red spike slammed back onto my screen, screaming its ugly song. I stopped the recording and leaned back in my chair, a feeling of grim satisfaction washing over me. "Gotcha," I whispered to the empty room. The on-off switch was her physical presence in the house. She was turning it on when she was home and turning it off when she left, probably to save a few pennies on the electricity bill. I had it all. Time-stamped, high-fidelity recordings of the illegal transmission. Time-stamped, high-definition video evidence of her coming and going, perfectly correlated with the signal's appearance and disappearance. I had the murder weapon, the fingerprints, and a motive born of pure, unadulterated, begonia-avenging pettiness. It was time to stop calling the local cops. It was time to call the big boys. There's a phone number in my secure contacts list that you hope you never have to use. It's not 911. It's not for a fire or a medical emergency. It's the 24-hour duty desk at the Federal Communications Commission's Enforcement Bureau in Washington, D.C. Calling that number is the communications equivalent of launching a nuclear missile. It's reserved for pirates hijacking broadcast signals, for terrorists trying to disrupt infrastructure, and for people who are about to have a profoundly, monumentally, life-alteringly bad day. I pulled up the evidence folder on my desktop. It was labeled simply Brenda_evidence_package. Inside were the video files, the signal recordings, the spectrum analysis logs, and a neatly written summary of events. I took a deep, steadying breath. Brenda's little war on my antennas, born from a toxic mix of paranoia and aesthetic fascism, had officially pissed off the wrong federal agency. I picked up the secure phone and dialed the number. A crisp, no-nonsense voice answered. "Enforcement Bureau, Agent Riley." "Agent Riley, good evening," I said, my voice calm, professional, and deadly serious. "My name is Alex Cowan. I'm the coordinator for the Regional Emergency Communications Grid, callsign GridCom for Tri-County, State. I'm reporting a case of willful and malicious interference with a public safety band, ongoing for approximately 36 hours. The interference is active now and is sourced from a single residential address. I have a complete data package, including spectrum analysis, high-precision triangulation data, and time-stamped audio-per-episode video recordings." The tone on the other end of the line shifted instantly from bureaucratic drone to razor-sharp attention. "GridCom, understood. You said it's affecting public safety bands?" "Affirmative," I said. "County fire main. It has been actively hampering emergency response operations during a declared local storm disaster." The line was silent for a moment, but it was a heavy silence, pregnant with implications. "Understood," Agent Riley said, his voice now cold as ice. "Please stand by. Send your data package to this secure email address. I'm sending you the credentials now." A string of characters appeared on my monitor. "What is the address of the signal source?" 38 Blossom Drive, I said, spelling out the street name. "Received," Riley said. "We'll be in touch. Stay off the premises. Do not engage with the individual. We'll take it from here." The line went dead. I attached the evidence folder to a new email, sent it to the secure address, and watched the progress bar fill. Message sent. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. The boulder was rolling downhill now. All I had to do was stand back and watch it flatten everything in its path. The next afternoon was quiet. The sun was out. The birds were chirping. A neighbor down the street, Mr. Henderson, was mowing his lawn. The drone of the engine a peaceful, normal sound. The world on Blossom Drive had returned to its state of carefully curated tranquility. And then the tranquility was shattered. It started with a single, dark blue Ford sedan with a cluster of weird little antennas on the trunk. It cruised slowly down the street and parked 3 houses down from Brenda's. Then another just like it appeared from the other direction and parked opposite the first. Then a marked state police cruiser turned onto our street, moving at a funereal pace. It was followed by another. Finally, the main event arrived. A big, black, intimidating Sprinter van with tinted windows and Department of Homeland Security stenciled on the side in stark white letters rolled up our quiet little street. It didn't park. It established a position directly across from Brenda's house. Mr. Henderson shut off his lawnmower. The sudden silence was deafening. Up and down the street, curtains began to twitch. The Blossom Drive Neighborhood Watch, which mostly consisted of bored retirees and stay-at-home parents, was on high alert. My secure phone rang. It was Agent Riley. "Mr. Cowan? We're here. We'd like you to accompany us as the primary complainant and technical expert. It helps expedite things." "On my way," I said. I walked out of my front door into the brilliant sunshine, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes on me. I strode across my lawn with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in days. I gave a little wave to Mr. Henderson, who was just standing by his silent lawnmower, his mouth agape. He did not wave back. I crossed the street to where a small group of very serious-looking people in polo shirts and tactical pants were gathered. Agent Riley, a crisp, fit man in his 40s with watchful eyes, shook my hand firmly. "Alex, thanks for your help on this. Your data package was the most complete I've ever seen from a civilian." "Happy to help," I said. "I believe in clear communication." Riley smirked. "All right, let's go have a chat." He, myself, and 2 state troopers who were roughly the size of refrigerators walked up Brenda's pristine flagstone path. Riley knocked firmly on the door. The ridiculously long Westminster chimes sounded again, a comically inappropriate soundtrack for the federal hammer that was about to fall. Brenda opened the door, a scowl already etched on her face, likely prepared for another confrontation with me. The scowl melted, replaced by a wave of confusion, then dawning fear, as she took in the assembled crowd on her doorstep. Her eyes darted from Agent Riley to the troopers, to me, and then past us to the DHS van and the police cars dotting her perfect street. "Can I help you?" she stammered. Agent Riley flipped open a leather folder containing his credentials. "Ma'am, I'm Agent Riley with the Federal Communications Commission. We have a federal warrant to search this property in relation to an investigation into illegal radio transmissions." What?" Brenda's voice was a squeak. "This is absurd. It must be him." She pointed a trembling finger at me. "He's the one with all the illegal radios. He's been spying on me." I looked at Riley with a deadpan expression. "She thinks my federally licensed and regulated equipment is illegal." Riley didn't even glance at me. His focus was entirely on Brenda. "Ma'am," he said, his voice patient but unyielding. "We have definitive, irrefutable proof that a powerful signal jamming device is being operated from within this house, a device that has been actively interfering with public safety communications for the last 2 days during a declared emergency. This has endangered first responders and the public. We can either do this easily, or we can do this with the battering ram that trooper is holding. The choice is yours." Brenda's face went chalk white. The color drained from her cheeks as if a plug had been pulled. She stammered, trying to form a protest, but the words wouldn't come. Her gaze flickered back to the troopers, to the van, to the cold, hard reality parked all over her curb. All the fight, all the righteous HOA indignation drained out of her. She silently, numbly stepped aside. We entered the house. It was just as I'd imagined, impeccably clean, suffocatingly beige, and smelling faintly of potpourri and desperation. Another agent, a younger tech guy, entered behind us carrying a portable spectrum analyzer that looked like a tricorder from an old Star Trek episode. He flipped it on. It immediately began to shriek, the needle on its display burying itself in the red. The agent swept the device through the living room, the dining room. The shrieking got louder as we approached a small, tidy home office off the main hallway. And there it was, sitting on her desk, next to a neatly organized pen holder and a silver-framed photo of her yappy dog, was a small black box with a single, thick antenna. A little red LED on it was pulsing, a steady, malevolent heartbeat. It was pulsing in perfect time with the bzz, whump, whump I knew so well. "Got it?" the tech agent said, pointing. "High-gain signal jammer. Running way over its power rating, too. It's hot to the touch." Agent Riley picked up the device with a gloved hand. He held it up for Brenda to see. Her eyes were wide with terror. "Ma'am," Riley said, his voice dropping to a low, serious tone. "Can you explain why you have this, and why you were using it?" Brenda finally broke. A sob escaped her lips. It was the noise!" she cried, her voice cracking. I couldn't help myself. "The noise?" I asked. "His antennas!" she wailed, wringing her hands. "The buzzing! The constant buzzing from his house. It was giving me migraines and making my little princess anxious. I bought that thing online to block his signals so I could have some peace and quiet." I stared at her, my mind reeling from the sheer, colossal ignorance of it all. "Brenda," I said, my voice flat with disbelief. "My antennas don't make any audible noise. You can't hear radio waves. They're not bees." Agent Riley stepped forward, his face a mask of grim professionalism. "Ma'am," he said, "the buzzing you were trying to block was likely from a faulty ballast in your own fluorescent kitchen lights. We get that call a lot. Instead, you illegally broadcast a signal powerful enough to block communications for every fire truck in a 10-mile radius, during a major storm, for 2 days. The look on Brenda's face was a masterpiece of horrified realization. It was the dawning, soul-crushing expression of someone who realizes they didn't just bring a knife to a gunfight. They brought a squeaky toy to an artillery barrage that they themselves had started. The perp walk, or more accurately, the sternly escorted walk, was the most beautiful I had ever seen. The entire neighborhood was now openly standing on their lawns, a silent, slack-jawed audience to the downfall of a tyrant. Agent Riley and the 2 state troopers escorted a stunned, pale Brenda from her house. She wasn't in handcuffs. That would come later, at the federal building downtown. But the message was crystal clear. The tech agent followed, carrying the little black jammer in a sealed evidence bag, as if it were a captured enemy flag. Manny and his crew, who I noticed had been tidying up their work site with the painstaking slowness of master craftsmen milking the clock, paused their non-work to watch the show. Manny caught my eye and gave me a solemn, almost imperceptible nod of deep and profound respect. The Queen was deposed, the reign of beige was over, and my glorious, new 20-foot antenna stood tall and proud against the afternoon sky, a silent, gleaming monument to victory. As the convoy of federal sedans and state police cruisers pulled away, taking Brenda with them, Officers Dave and Gary cruised by one last time. Dave slowed their car to a crawl. He rolled down his window, looked me right in the eye, and gave me a slow, deliberate thumbs up. Then, a small smile touched his lips, and they drove on. Vindicated. A day later, I was back in my command center, on a video call with Agent Riley. He looked tired but satisfied. "So the U.S. Attorney's Office is taking the case," he said, getting straight to the point. They were not amused. Given the direct impact on emergency services during a declared disaster, they're not messing around. She's facing multiple federal charges: willful interference with public safety radio, obstruction of emergency broadcasts. It's a long and expensive-sounding list. We're talking massive fines, possible prison time. Apparently, they want to make an example out of her. "Wow," I said, genuinely taken aback by the severity. All because she thought my antenna was making her begonias droopy. Riley chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "You'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't. Hey, on another note, the boys in the engineering division were very impressed with your data package, said it was the cleanest signal capture from a civilian source they'd ever seen. That phased array setup in your backyard? That's a nice piece of kit." "Thanks," I said with a grin. "Just a little something I whipped up." After the call ended, I went upstairs to get a drink. I saw a thick, cream-colored envelope had been slipped under my front door. It was from the HOA. With a sense of trepidation, I opened it. It wasn't a fine. It was a short, typed letter on the official HOA letterhead. It profusely, almost comically, apologized for the recent misunderstandings regarding my utility equipment. It went on to inform me that, due to unforeseen personal circumstances, Brenda Henderson had resigned from her position as president, effective immediately. A new interim president had been appointed. A week later, life on Blossom Drive had found a new normal. The neighborhood was different, quieter. The air felt lighter. People waved at me now. Not the quick, awkward, "Hello, please don't make eye contact with the weird antenna guy" of before, but a slow, respectful nod. The legend of what happened had grown with each telling across manicured lawns and over backyard fences. Depending on who was telling the story, I was either a secret agent for the CIA, a reclusive tech billionaire, or the guy who single-handedly brought the wrath of the entire United States government down on Brenda because of a disagreement over lawn ornaments. I was fine with all three. I was sitting on my back deck in the warm light of the late afternoon sun. The new tower gleamed, my own personal Statue of Liberty. On the table next to me, a small, portable radio scanner was quietly cycling through the local frequencies, a habit I couldn't break. Police, fire, EMS. All of them were perfectly, beautifully, satisfyingly clear. I heard a routine dispatch call. A cat stuck in a tree on the other side of town. Normalcy. The beautiful, boring sound of a system that works. Brenda's house went up for sale 2 days ago. The "for sale" sign is immaculate, of course, perfectly centered on the lawn. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that the new interim HOA president is a retired software engineer, a deadhead who wants to tear up the useless communal flower beds and start a community vegetable garden. I think I can live with that. I took a long sip of my cold beer and listened to the airwaves. The beautiful, wonderful, life-saving sound of absolutely nothing going wrong. The sound of peace, my peace, that I'd earned with a little bit of technical know-how, a whole lot of spite, and one very, very well-placed phone call. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes against the sun, and smiled. The radio crackled softly, a lullaby of public safety. And for the first time in a long time, all was quiet on the home front.